The HDR implementation in Metro Exodus on the PC is very disappointing compared to the PlayStation 5 version and Xbox Series X, but to get you an idea what I'm talking about, watch this. And this is what you get when you not optimize your picture settings or using tricks to get actually a better HDR experience out of the PC version. Compared to PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, the picture is completely washed out in the PC version. But if you do some optimization, you can actually get this. But nevertheless, I was not able to get the PC version on the same level or to the same level as the console version in terms of contrast and specular highlights. There's always a little bit missing, but it's actually very close. But again, in the standard factory settings, the PC version is a complete mess. But now it's time to talk about my settings, and it's actually quite simple on the PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X, because this game supports the HDR system level calibration on the console, but I found actually a little bit of a problem. So let me try to explain what I found. When you set up HDR PlayStation 5, let's say on the G2, that's usually 15 clicks from the very beginning for around 1000 candela maximum peak brightness. I have done this and I tested Metro Exodus, but I came out with a very low maximum peak brightness in the game. And the same happened to my HGiG in combination with the Xbox Series X. But setting up HDR here, even with TVs, they are not supporting HGiG. It's actually quite simple. All what you have to do in this menu, press the 4 shoulder buttons and you're getting a little bit of information. What are your values actually? But anyway, for the CX, you set this up at around 800 candela to have the maximum peak brightness of your TV. But again, if I have done this, and yes, the game really supports the HDR system level calibration on the console, but in both cases, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, G2, CX, when I have done this in the correct way, my maximum peak brightness in the game was always too low. But of course I did a little bit of testing and eventually I came up with the right values for the in-game maximum peak brightness. But I like to make this very clear. This is the first time that this happened, because usually you set this up in the correct way and the maximum peak brightness in supported games like Deathloop or Call of Duty is exactly as it should be. Unfortunately, the PC version of Metro Exodus does not support the HDR calibration app in Windows 11. I tried really everything, but the maximum peak brightness in this game on the PC is always limited to 2100 candela. The only option what we have in the game to change picture brightness or picture appearance is the gamma option, but I would recommend to leave it at the standard setting, which is 5 clicks from the left side, because what I found is if you increase this value, you will start clipping very fine details and specular highlights. So 5 is really, at least on the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5, my recommendation. On the PC, on the other hand, with my optimized settings, you may like to increase this setting a little bit to get a little bit more of average brightness out, but this, as always, is absolutely up to you, and of course it depends in what environment you're playing. Okay, so let's take a closer look on my settings, or my recommended settings for PlayStation 5, Xbox and PC. And I told you already that the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X version are supporting the HDR system level calibration on the console, but with a little bug. To get the right peak brightness in Metro Exodus on the consoles, you need to cheat a little bit in the HDR system level calibration menu. To get 800 nits for the LG CX or similar TVs, instead of 14 clicks, you have to select 15 clicks, otherwise you end up with a too low maximum peak brightness. And for TVs with a maximum peak brightness of around 1000 nits like the LG G2 S95B or A95K, instead of 15 clicks, which is usually the right value for the PlayStation 5, you have to select 17 clicks this time to get around 1000 candela. And for TVs with 1500 nits maximum peak brightness, select 20 clicks for the PlayStation 5 HDR calibration. Setting up HDR in Metro Exodus on the Xbox Series is much easier than on the PlayStation 5, because all what you have to do is you press the 4 shoulder buttons on your Xbox controller while you're in the HDR menu. And now on the top right corner you can see exactly what values you are using right now. For 800 nits TVs like the LG CX, set your Xbox for Metro Exodus to 1000 nits. For 1000 nits TVs like the LG G2, use 1300, and for TVs with a maximum peak brightness of around 1500 nits like the QN95B, use 2000. And again, on the PC, the HDR calibration app in Windows 11 has no support or no impact in the game. The only picture setting what we have in the game is called Gamma, but I told you already on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X I would not increase this value, because as soon you increase this just slightly you will start clip very fine details in specular highlights. And the same counts for the PC version, but if you find that the picture after my optimized settings is a little bit too dark, then increase this value, the gamma setting in the game slightly. But again, you will see some clipping in very bright specular highlights. And now we're moving on to the brightness and fine-tune dark area settings on our LG OLED TV. And unfortunately, we have to use both settings to get a more or less okay HDR picture out of this game. Change the brightness setting on your LG OLED TV to 40 and the fine-tune dark area setting to -30. Please keep in mind, the fine-tune dark area setting is just enabled or working with VRR enabled. Dolby Vision, HGiG or dynamic tone mapping on, at the end it's really up to you, but the fact that Metro Exodus on the console supports the HDR system level calibration makes it of course perfect for HGiG. For the PC version on the other hand, it's a different story, because we have unfortunately no settings where we can restrict the maximum peak brightness in this game. So the maximum peak brightness is limited to around 2100 candela. In this case, give it a try if you like HGiG more or dynamic tone mapping on. And last but not least, a couple of words to Dolby Vision on the Xbox Series X. Yes, you can use Dolby Vision for this game, but it is not supported natively. All what the Dolby Vision picture mode is doing is using the HDR10 metadata, and that's it. So the only difference what you should see is most likely because of different picture settings, between HDR10 and Dolby Vision. After Days Gone on a PC, this is a big disappointment. To be very honest, I was expecting more, especially because the PlayStation and Xbox version from this game, Metro Exodus, they have really a very great HDR implementation. Contrast is superb, colors are great, and specular highlights with a little bit of tuning, of course, from the HDR system level menu or calibration menu. It's great, really, really great. So again, I don't know what's happening with the HDR system level calibration on the console, because I never had this before. Usually when you set this up, it's done. In games like Deathloop or supported games, Outriders or Call of Duty, also Dirt 5, perfect. There's no problem at all. Just in Metro Exodus, you have way too less maximum peak brightness. And you can see it actually, it looks a little bit dull, especially on the CX, because maximum peak brightness with the correct settings in the menu is just way below. Anyway, after some fine tuning, it's working pretty well. It does look great, and in my opinion, this game is anyway a recommendation, regardless if you play this on a PC or the console. You have ray tracing effects, of course, in the PC version, higher resolution, and most likely, depending on your PC, better frame rate or higher frame rate. But I enjoyed actually the gameplay on the PlayStation 5 because of the adaptive trigger function, which is great, but again, it's absolutely up to you. Gameplay wise, it really doesn't matter where you play the game, console or PC. In terms of HDR, the console version is still better than the PC version.